Welcome to this comprehensive lecture on IGCSE Physics. Today we are diving into the very foundation of the subject with Chapter 1, Measurements and Units. Physics is often described as the study of the universe, but more practically, it is the science of measurement. Without the ability to quantify what we observe, we cannot develop laws or theories. In this session, we will move beyond simple numbers and explore how we standardize measurements across the globe, the tools we use to achieve high precision, and the mathematical frameworks that ensure our scientific communication is both accurate and consistent. Whether you are measuring the diameter of a microscopic wire or the time it takes for a pendulum to swing, the principles we cover today will be your guide. Before we begin, let's outline our roadmap for this chapter. Our primary goal is to ensure you can confidently define physical quantities and distinguish them from non-physical ones. We will spend a significant amount of time on the SI system, the International System of Units, which is the language of science. You will also learn the practical side of physics, how to select and use the right measuring instruments, from a simple meter ruler to the high-precision micrometer screw gauge. Finally, we will tackle the critical concepts of accuracy and precision and learn how to report our findings using significant figures. These aren't just exam topics, they are the essential skills of any practicing scientist. Let's start with the basics. What exactly is a physical quantity? In physics, a physical quantity is any property of an object or phenomenon that can be measured and quantified. This means it must have two essential components, a numerical magnitude and a specific unit. For example, if I tell you a car is traveling at 50, that information is useless. 50 what? Miles per hour, kilometers per hour, meters per second? The unit provides the context that makes the number meaningful. We see this in everyday life. Mass is measured in kilograms, time in seconds, and temperature in degrees Celsius or Kelvin. Without both the number and the unit, a measurement is incomplete and scientifically invalid. It's helpful to think of physical quantities as being organized into a hierarchy. At the foundation, we have base quantities. These are fundamental and cannot be defined in terms of other physical quantities. Think of them as the primary colors of physics, like length, mass, and time. From these base quantities, we derive everything else. For instance, speed is a derived quantity because it is calculated by dividing length by time. Similarly, density is derived from mass and volume. Understanding this relationship is key because it allows us to break down complex units like newtons or joules into their fundamental base components, which is a very common requirement in your IGCSE exams. In the past, different countries used different systems of measurement, which led to immense confusion and even catastrophic engineering failures. To solve this, the scientific community adopted the Système International d'Unité, or SI units. This is a standardized metric system used worldwide. By using SI units, a scientist in Tokyo can perfectly understand the experimental results of a scientist in London. This consistency is vital for international collaboration, peer review, and, of course, your own laboratory work. When you are solving physics problems, your first step should almost always be to convert your measurements into SI units to ensure your final answer is correct. On this slide, you see a table of the most common SI units you'll encounter in this course. It's important to memorize these symbols. For length, we use the meter, symbolized by a lowercase m. For mass, the base unit is actually the kilogram, kg, which is unique as it's the only base unit with a prefix. Time is measured in seconds, S. We also have the ampere for electric current, the Kelvin for temperature, and the mole for the amount of substance. You will notice that symbols are case-sensitive. For example, a capital K for Kelvin is mandatory. Mastering this table is the first step toward becoming fluent in the language of physics. Physics deals with the incredibly large and the incredibly small. To avoid writing long strings of zeros, we use SI prefixes. These are multipliers that scale the base unit. For example, the prefix kilo means 1,000, so a kilometer is 1,000 meters. On the smaller side, mila means 1,000th, so a milligram is 0.001 grams. Other common prefixes include mega for a million, centi for a hundredth, and micro for a millionth. You must become comfortable converting between these. A quick tip: when moving from a larger unit to a smaller one, you multiply. When moving from a smaller unit to a larger one, you divide. This skill is essential for almost every calculation you will perform. Now, let's look at the practical tools for measuring length. The most common tool is the meter ruler, which has a precision of 1 millimeter. This means your measurement is reliable to plus or minus 0.5 millimeters. However, a major source of error when using a ruler is parallax error. This occurs when your eye is not directly above the mark you are reading, causing the object to appear aligned with a different point on the scale. To avoid this, always ensure your line of sight is perpendicular to the ruler. For objects that aren't flat, or when you need more precision, we move to more advanced tools like calipers, which we will discuss on the next slide. When a ruler isn't precise enough, we turn to the vernier caliper and the micrometer screw gauge. A vernier caliper can measure internal diameters, like the inside of a pipe, and external diameters with a precision of 0.1 millimeters. It uses a sliding scale to find that extra decimal place. For even smaller measurements, like the thickness of a single sheet of paper or the diameter of a thin copper wire, we use the micrometer screw gauge. This tool is incredibly precise, reaching 0.01 millimeters. A critical step with both tools is checking for zero error, ensuring the device reads exactly zero when closed. If it doesn't, you must subtract that error from your final reading to stay accurate. Measuring time might seem simple, but in a physics lab, accuracy is paramount. For most classroom experiments, a digital stopwatch is sufficient, measuring to the nearest hundredth of a second. However, human reaction time, usually around 0.2 seconds, introduces a significant random error. To minimize this, we often measure the time for multiple events and then calculate the average. For example, instead of timing one swing of a pendulum, we time 20 swings and divide the total time by 20. This drastically reduces the impact of the reaction time error on the period of a single swing. For high-speed events, we use electronic light gates, which eliminate human error entirely. These two terms are often used interchangeably in everyday speech, but in physics, they mean very different things. Accuracy is how close your measurement is to the true or accepted value. If the true length is 10 centimeters and you measure 9.9, you are very accurate. Precision, on the other hand, refers to the consistency of your results. If you measure the same object 5 times and get 9.2 every single time, your measurements are very precise, even if they aren't accurate. Ideally, we want both. A good way to visualize this is a dartboard. Hitting the bullseye is accurate. Hitting the same spot on the outer rim repeatedly is precise but inaccurate. When we record a measurement, the number of digits we use communicates how precise our instrument was. These are called significant figures. There are a few key rules. All non-zero digits are always significant. Zeros between non-zero digits are also significant. However, leading zeros, the ones at the start of a small decimal, are not significant. They are just placeholders. Trailing zeros are only significant if there is a decimal point in the number. For example, in the number 0.050, there are only two significant figures, the 5 and the final 0. Learning to round your final answers to the same number of significant figures as your least precise measurement is a vital habit for any scientist. Let's put theory into practice with some examples. First, a conversion. If we have 2.5 kilometers and want meters, we multiply by the kilo factor of 1,000, giving us 2,500 meters. Next, rounding. If a calculator gives you 0.004567 and you need 3 significant figures, you look at the fourth digit, the 7, and round up the 6, giving you 0.00457. Finally, identifying significant figures. In the number 6.07, the 0 is trapped between non-zeros, so it counts, giving us 3 significant figures. In 0.020, the first 2 zeros are placeholders, but the last one counts because of the decimal, giving us 2 significant figures. As you study this chapter, watch out for common pitfalls. Many students mistakenly believe that a very precise measurement is automatically accurate, but as we've seen, a poorly calibrated tool can give very consistent but wrong results. Another common error is forgetting to check for zero error on calipers or micrometers, which adds a systematic bias to every single reading. Also, be careful with units. Always check if you need to convert centimeters to meters or grams to kilograms before starting your calculations. Finally, don't just copy every digit from your calculator. always round to the appropriate number of significant figures to reflect the true precision of your experiment. Let's take a moment to recap. Can you recall the SI unit for mass? Remember, it's the kilogram, not the gram. How about converting 2.3 centimeters to millimeters? Since there are 10 millimeters in a centimeter, you multiply by 10 to get 23. If you were asked to measure the diameter of a thin pencil, which tool would you choose? A vernier caliper would be the most appropriate choice for that level of detail. Take a second to think about how you would convert 0.65 kilometers into meters. If you got 650, you're on the right track. These quick checks help ensure the core concepts are sticking. To truly master these skills, you need hands-on practice. For your homework, I want you to find 3 different objects around your home, perhaps a book, a coin, and a small container. Measure them using a standard ruler. If you happen to have access to a vernier caliper, use that as well to see the difference in precision. Once you have your measurements, practice converting them into at least 2 different units, for example, from centimeters to meters and millimeters. Finally, make sure you record your results using the correct number of significant figures based on the tool you used. This practical application is where the real learning happens. To wrap up Chapter 1, I've provided a set of practice questions that mirror what you might see on an IGCSE exam. These cover everything from identifying SI units and performing unit conversions to explaining the difference between accuracy and precision. Pay close attention to the questions on significant figures and instrument precision. For example, if a stopwatch measures to the nearest 0.01 seconds, how does that affect your reporting? Answering these questions thoroughly will not only prepare you for your tests, but also build a solid foundation for the more complex physics topics we will explore in the coming chapters. Good luck with your studies!